Thank you everyone for coming today. I am Miss Lewis, Elementary Principal. Before I forget, Mr. Skywalker, here is a copy of the Notice of Procedural Safeguards. As a parent of a child who may have a disability, there are federal and state laws that give you certain rights. This provides an explanation of some of those rights, but if you would like a more detailed explanation, you may contact us at the school or any of the resources listed here on the last page. Do you have any questions so far?
No, I'm fine.
All right, Ms. Reed, you can get us started.
I'm Mrs. Reed, and I am the school psychologist here. So I did the testing. We spoke on the phone earlier about the rating forms. Go ahead, Mr. Ratliff.
Oh, we already met, but I'm Alice's math and science teacher.
It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you again as well.
All right, to remind everyone, we met a few months ago to discuss concerns about how Alice was doing in school. At that time, we decided to perform an initial evaluation for special education eligibility for specific learning disability. We have done some testing and we'll discuss that shortly. Before that, Mr. Skywalker, can you share again with us some of the concerns you were having for Alice?
My main concern is that Alice is starting to dislike school, and she often ends up in tears each evening when doing her math homework specifically. Mr. Ratliff and I have discussed at our parent-teacher conference why she's struggling so much on her math questions, tests, and homework. I noticed she was struggling with math last year in the second grade, but throughout, thought maybe she was just rushing through it and being careless. You know, she always wants to talk to her friends and then go do her homework. But now, this year, I'm getting much more concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Skywalker. Mr. Ratliff, what are you seeing with Alice in the math classroom?
Well, actually, as I discussed with Mr. Skywalker, I am also having concerns with Alice's performance in math specifically. Early in the year, when we were mostly reviewing, I saw that she was working hard and had a great attitude. She was struggling with some of the work, especially with fractions and long division, but would ask me or classmates for help. As we have progressed and the math work has gotten harder, she has fallen behind the class quickly. She seems to get overwhelmed and sometimes seems to give up easily. She especially struggles the practice word problems we did every Thursday in the fall in preparation for standardized testing. She does do better when I or another student give her one-on-one help, but I notice she struggles to retain the information and apply it the next day.
Does that describe what you're seeing at home with Alice, Mr. Skywalker?
That's exactly what I'm seeing when she comes home each night. She's given up way too easy, I think, and we're working with her every night on her math skills, but it's become a stressful situation for both us and Alice. I'm not sure if we're pushing her too hard or not hard enough. I'm also confused why she does so well in her language arts classes and she does so poorly in her math classes.
We do have a report from another teacher, if it's okay to share that now, on how Alice is doing in her other class. So Mrs. Waldroth, who teaches her reading, language arts, and spelling, said she's doing really well in all of those classes. So she has all A's in those classes, which kind of corresponds with what you said, Mr. Skywalker. She describes Alice as being a very thoughtful, caring student, and she said Alice really likes to help her peers and seems to want to please adults. She said she really shines whenever she's giving individual or group presentations, so she really seems to enjoy that and stand out. She also shared that Alice appears to have a lot of friends in her class, so doesn't really seem to be struggling socially. She doesn't really have any current concerns for Alice's school performance from what she's seen, and she was really surprised, she said, when she first heard that Alice was being evaluated.
Yeah, that sounds more like the Alice I see in my science class. She seems much more confident and outgoing. She raises her hand to participate often, while in my math class she seems more withdrawn.
Okay. Mr. Skywalker, it sounds like the main area of concern is Alice's math performance. Do you have any more concerns at this time?
No, it's just her math is we're really afraid that she's falling behind. And we need some more information and help to try to get her to understand the math, and that's Alice's mother and I's concern.
Ms. Lewis, would this be a good time for me to share some of the testing results then?
Yes, go ahead, Miss Reed.
Okay. So first of all, I want you to know I really enjoyed working with Alice. She was a lot of fun. It's very easy to converse with her, and you can tell she's very. She seems very socially adept. Like she really has conversed with adults quite often in the past.
That's good to hear.
So we were talking about her dogs, and the next day she brought in pictures of her dogs to share and was really excited to share them. And she also talked a lot about riding horses when she was at summer camp. So that must have been a really good experience for her. When I asked her, I did like a little interview with her, and she stated that she likes school, so especially PE and language arts, but she doesn't think she's very good at math. So she has some awareness that she's struggling more in math than her other classes. When I asked her what she wants to be when she grows up, she said she wanted to be a pilot or a travel agent, so that when she grows up she can travel a lot.
That's good to hear that she likes school. I think that was our main focus, that she would fall behind because it was a stressful situation, especially with her math. And we're hoping to sign her up with summer camp again this year, because she did have a lot of enjoyment with the horses and dogs.
Oh, good. Well, she would be really excited to hear that. So in reviewing some of our records, like you filled out all those papers for us and gave us all the information. In reviewing that, there were no significant medical issues or no hospitalizations. Alice met all of her developmental milestones as she was progressing, and she's not currently on any medications. Is that all still true?
That's correct.
Okay. You also indicated that she recently had both hearing and visual exams, and her hearing was within normal limits, and that she gets glasses to correct nearsightedness.
Yes.
Okay. And it seems like she's pretty compliant with wearing those glasses also.
She's very good at wearing her glasses.
Okay, that's good. So in reviewing her records, I've noticed that she currently has all A's in her classes, except for she has a D+ in math. In talking to Mr. Ratliff, it's not because she's not turning things in, it's because the stuff she turns in is not always exactly correct, and she seems to struggle a lot more with testing. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. In reviewing some of her other like standardized testing, she already passed her IREAD 3, so she's not going to have any problems moving on from that. She also passed language arts portion of I-STEPS, but she did fail the math portion of the I-STEPS. So that again is in alignment with what you told us is going on in the classroom and what your concerns are.
Yes.
So I wanted to show you first of all, this is, and you guys have these in each of your packets. This is what we call a standardized curve. So I'm going to move that over real quickly. So this kind of shows the distribution of how students might test as compared to other students their age. And there are different ways to measure this. This is what we call a standard scores, which we'll discuss a lot today, and these are percentile rates, which we'll talk about when we talk about standardized scores. This is what we call, from this 80 to 120 here, this is what we call the broad average range. So you can see most students fit into this average range for their scores. Really when we start to get more concerned is when they tend to fall, it's okay, in this low range here, so below this range, and especially like below that kind of 70 range. And then exceptional areas where they have like exceptional strengths might be above this 120 range right here. In looking at percentile ranks, we can discuss her NWEA scores. So NWEA are standardized tests that we give in math and reading and language. And we do that at the beginning of the year, and we do it at the middle of the year, so right after Christmas break, and then we do it again at the end of the year. And we've done that every year that Alice has been in school. So if we look this year, for the beginning of the year, she was in the 62nd percentile for reading, which means she did as well or better than 62% of the other students her age. So if we look right here, 62 falls right here. So she's well within the average. She's kind of on the high end of the average range for her reading. In middle of the year, she was at 68th percentile. So again, she's doing really well, which is right where or a little ahead of where we want her to be on math. Or on reading. On the other hand, for math, at the beginning of the year, she fell in the 9th percentile range. So if you look right here, that's right here on the edge of what we consider the low range.
Okay.
So as compared to her reading, she's actually pretty low on her math, and low as compared to her peers also. And then in the middle of the year, she was at the 8th percentile of the for math, which is kind of basically in that same area. In 3rd grade, for math, she was in the 14th to 17th percentile range, which is kind of in this range right here. So we can see her performance in math has fallen just a little bit, which might be as the pacing of school increases. If she's struggling a little bit in math, that struggle might increase a little bit over time.
Okay.
Do you have any questions about any of the standardized testing scores?
No, I see it on the graph. That's very helpful.
Okay, good. All right. So as another part of the testing, something else that I did is I went in and performed some observations of Alice during class to see how she was doing. So I performed observations in both her reading class, in a science class, and in a math class. Okay. When I was watching her during the reading course class, the teacher was giving full classroom instruction, and Alice seemed very engaged. She was raising her hand, she was participating quite a bit, and then they did some group work. And Alice really actually seemed to take some leadership in that group work. They were pulling together a presentation on a book that they had read, and she really seemed really enthusiastic about that. And when her behavior in science class was very similar, so she seemed very engaged and participatory and was raising her hand and asking questions during class. However, when I observed her during math class, she seemed to just overall be a little bit more stressed. I saw her like rubbing her head and putting her head down often. She sat towards the back of the class, and as in the other classes she seemed to be in the middle, but she seemed to kind of isolate herself a little bit more. And I noticed when it was time to do independent work, she was spending a lot of time staring out the window. Is that something you see a lot,
Yeah.
Mr. Ratliff? Also, a lot of the class, as Mr. Ratliff was doing, like projecting some of the work on the whiteboard, a lot of students were giving oral responses, and I didn't see Alice doing that with the other students very often. So overall, her overall demeanor seemed very different during math class. Do you have anything to add to that, or is that pretty much what you see?
That's pretty much what I see as well.
Okay. Right. Any questions about that?
No, that sounds consistent with what we see at home.
Okay. When I pulled Alice from class to perform one-on-one testing, I brought her to my office and kind of explained to her what we would be doing, and I performed that testing over a couple of days. So as she needed breaks, she was able to get breaks, and we took some downtime in between that. I noticed she was working really hard throughout testing. She wore her glasses the whole time and didn't really appear to be struggling to read the materials. Also, she seemed to understand the directions really well, but she would ask for clarifications from time to time, which is good that she's asking if she doesn't know how to do something. She did show some frustration when she was working on math as compared to some of the other areas. For example, one time she said oh, I should know how to do that when she was doing it. So she kind of had this sense that she should know how to do something, but she couldn't. And then another time, she told me, actually a couple times she told me that math was not her thing. So she wasn't as good at math. So she seems to have some awareness that math is more of a struggle for her, maybe than some of the other areas, which I think is kind of some of what you're saying. When she's at home really struggling with that homework, she seems to be maybe super aware of that at home.
Absolutely. That's where I think we do see the stress and the struggle that she's having.
Yeah, and maybe she's holding back some of those emotions when she's at school, and then when she's at home, some of those emotions come out.
Well, that makes sense.
Concerning math. All right. So, any questions before I move on to some of the testing results?
No.
Okay. Right. So the first set of results I'm going to show you, and you guys have these in your paperwork too. This is the cognitive testing. So cognitive testing is basically what sorts of innate abilities does she have? So what kind of abilities was she born with or has developed over time?
Okay.
And again, it's that same standard curve. So anything from here from the 80 to 120 range is that broad average range. And then below is more concerning, and this is more of a high exceptional area of strength would be. So first of all, we typically get an overall what we call an overall intelligence or cognitive measure. However, because you can see her scores were very spread out, it was difficult. We couldn't really find one kind of measure that represents everything. However, we are able to estimate that her overall intelligence is at least average, if not a little bit high average.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. So let's look at some of these individual areas. So we could look at first at verbal comprehension, and that is her word knowledge, or her ability to apply and demonstrate verbal understanding. And you can see here it's 121. So that's actually in the high range. So this is a personal area of strength for Alice. And additionally, it's an area of strength as compared to her average peers. So she's really able to express herself very well, which is kind of what we heard from Mrs. Waldreth. And is that what you see at home and in the classroom too?
Yes, at home, her language arts, she's very happy with doing her homework and no level of stress at all.
Okay. Then this green dot here, that's her visual spatial skills. So that's how well is she able to understand and manipulate visual details, like solving visual puzzles or something like that. You can see here that that's actually 79. So that's in the low range right here. So as compared to her verbal comprehension, this is actually more of an area of weakness for her, both personally and maybe as compared to some of her peers. So maybe she's struggling a little bit to manipulate those visual details. So that might give us some insight into why math might be more of an issue for her.
Okay.
Any questions about that?
No, all that makes sense.
Okay. The next area is fluid reasoning. So how well is she able to solve new problems or novel problems that she hasn't seen before? And it also has to do with abstract thinking. And our fluid reasoning was 102, which is right here in the middle of the average range, so it's right where we want it to be. The orange dot is her working memory. So how well is she able to attend to what someone is saying or what she's seeing, and hold and memorize and hold that information in her head, and then be able to have control and give that information back to you if you ask for it over a short period of time. And you can see that's 98. So again, that's right here in the middle of the average range. So right where we want her to be.
Okay.
Her processing speed. How quickly and accurately is she able to do things? That was it was 110. So it's right here in the average range. So she's again right where we want her to be with her processing speed. Any questions about that before we move on to the next part?
No, that's good.
Okay. This next one that we're going to look at, that's the next paper, this achievement. And again, this is the same standardized curve here. So achievement is how well has she learned things in the school environment, her reading, her writing, and her math. So if you look at her reading is 126. So if you look right here, her reading, again, that's an area of strength for her. You can see it's in this high range right here. So as compared to her peers even, she's going to do really well. So she probably feels very confident, I would guess, in her reading abilities, which is probably why, reading and language arts are a lot easier for her.
I think that's why she feels confident in a group setting as well.
You think so?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Her fluency and comprehension are right where we wanted it to be. Her math, however, is 76. So you can see that's right here in the middle of that low range. Okay, so as compared again to her reading, her math is pretty low. I can see, especially when she's so good at math, really kind of struggling more with reading, or she's good with reading, struggling more with math, she's really probably going to feel that. And be very aware of that, which it seems like she is. So that would explain some of her frustration with math. So both her math calculation and her math problem solving are both in this low range. On the other hand, her writing, her written expression is 93. It's right here. So it's exactly where we would expect it to be. Both her essay composition and her spelling were both in the average range there. We also I wanted to test her oral expression because I wanted to see how well she's able to, especially since her verbal comprehension was so high, how well is she able to express what she needs to express her needs to other people.
Okay.
That was 129. So again, that's really in that high area. So we really want to support that with her. If she's really struggling with something, to be able to self-advocate and go talk to her teacher or talk to you as her parent, and get the help that she needs. I think supporting her and doing that would be that's a good area of strength for her. I also wanted to test her listening comprehension, because sometimes students struggle with understanding what they've heard or hearing instructions from parents or from teachers. But her listening comprehension was right where we want it to be. It was 104, so right in the middle of the average range. So any questions about that?
No, the graph, everything that you've explained on the graph is everything that we see at home.
Okay, all right. So that's kind of what you're seeing in the classroom also? Okay. So just to review, overall we're seeing a pretty clear patterns of strengths and weaknesses with Alice. We see that she has very high verbal comprehension. That is an area of strength for her, whereas visual spatial skills is an area of weakness, which really corresponds with struggling specifically with math. Her reading is an area of strength for her, whereas her math, and also her oral comprehension is a big area of strength for her, whereas her math, but the problem solving and calculation are areas of weakness, especially compared to, when we see, if we see someone who's doing kind of equally well in everything, we'll see things clustered together, but you can see on this graph how they're very spread out, or different abilities are very spread out.
Okay, yes, the graph, everything makes a lot more sense now, seeing the graph and understanding her struggles in math versus her strengths in language arts.
So I'm really seeing clear patterns of strengths and weaknesses, especially concerning math, Ms. Lewis.
All right. It sounds like we are considering special education eligibility for a specific learning disability in math at this time. Mr. Skywalker, does it sound to you like Alice might benefit from individualized instruction and additional resources in math?
Absolutely. I think that would be very helpful for her.
I also think the data supports SLD in math for Alice.
And I agree also. I think that it's a very clear pattern, and definitely more of a struggle in math, and she could benefit from some additional resources in that area.
All right, now that we're agreed on that, let's see if we can determine what resources and accommodations would be most helpful for Alice.
Okay.